Attributes, elements, and types. These are 3 words to name one system in video games that centers around weaknesses and strengths. A is strong against B is strong against C, but C is strong against A. Across video games, this design has allowed for the diversification of encounters that promote varying methods of gameplay, such as when a player finds an overwhelming enemy, but soon after a special tool that can easily take them down. In some situations, it can be a special sword, a targeted weak point, and in others, it can be a new skill or perhaps a teammate. My name is Saintontas, and I'm here to review the design of this element system within Wuthering Waves, and how this design should influence decision-making within your account, and specifically its development and roster. The main purpose of elements is to give a monster a resistance to a certain damage type or a weakness to another. By leveraging the 6 elements of Fusion, Glacio, Aero, Electro, Spectro, and Havoc, the developers can assign various weaknesses and resistances to encounters that heavily promote the use, or in some cases, the disuse of certain characters. An enemy like Crownless, for example, will have the Havoc attribute and a natural resistance to the element. On the other hand, it'll also be more vulnerable to Spectro damage. In the early game, where you're less likely to brute force content through well-built characters, acquiring Havoc equipment means you'll have to grind the Havoc monster, making a character like the Rover, who is the Spectro element, a great character to tackle this content. If a player wants to compete at the highest level of content and achieve the highest tier of rewards, players must be able to field at least 3 teams from their roster. These teams are used in a game mode similar to Genshin Impact's Spiral Abyss, with time restrictions that require careful consideration of team compositions, or the swiping of a credit card to get the best results. The end result is a progression and account-building philosophy that values type coverage. To break this down, let's imagine a scenario where you pulled Cal Charo from the standard banner, and a couple of copies of Dan Jin, and also managed to pull Jian from the first limited banner. As a player, you might be thinking, "Oh, my 3 teams for the endgame are set!" These 3 characters all play the DPS role in a team, and also all have 3 different elements. They'll easily contribute the most damage to your team composition, and are generally a part of a lot of early game teams. However, let's just say that in this end mode, there are 2 boss enemies that are resistant to either Aero, Electro, or Havoc. Your previous team comps that fully cleared last week's content may struggle to full clear the current week's. We can imagine that as future characters release, these elemental lineups and type preferences will shift to accommodate for the new character's attribute. This means that for the meta-focused players out there, double dipping on elemental coverage through the limited banners could mean that your account might not be ready for future content. Taking our previous example forward, if I was able to pull Calcharo and fully build him from the standard banner, I might hesitate to pull for Yinlin and spend my time-gated resources on her development.
Well, why might I, you ask? She is perhaps one of the most beautiful characters we've seen in the gacha space and would undoubtedly make a fine addition to any team this early on in release.
That reason is because you might have heavy buyer's remorse by the next limited character's release. Doubling on elemental coverage can severely limit your team compositions. Having a Phillips head screwdriver that is a lot nicer than your old one is great, but it's not so great if those are your only 2 screwdrivers and your screws look like this. Taking a look at one of the most recent gacha games released, Honkai Star Rail, we can draw some similarities between Wuthering Waves. Despite Honkai Star Rail living in a different genre as a turn-based strategy game, it's a great example to portray some of the dynamics that a type system like this creates. If players pull and develop units that can leverage a boss's weakness, their ability to clear content skyrockets dramatically. This makes a DPS character, typically seen as the most replaceable or easily power-crept unit across teams, have much more value in Honkai Star Rail teams. There may be some characters or skills that can modify these weaknesses and resistances, like Silver Wolf or Pella from Honkai Star Rail, or intro/outro system in Wuthering Waves that can reduce enemy resistances and temporarily bypass type disadvantages. but through thoughtful progression, through equipment farming in echoes, and planned roster building to shore up elemental coverage, new players in Wuthering Waves can set their account up to succeed in future endgame content. It's important to keep in mind that DPS characters are going to be essential to exploiting elemental weaknesses to the highest degree. I know that I didn't go very in-depth on some of the nuances behind the intro/outro systems, but you're in luck. There have been prior CCs that have done a fantastic job explaining these topics, so I'll just go ahead and link them in the description below. Hopefully this breakdown was helpful and you'll plan out your polls with this information in mind. Please hit that like and subscribe button. I'll actually start streaming regularly on twitch.tv/Saintontas. Link will be in the description below. I know that we're all sitting here with an absolutely unimaginable amount of anticipation, knowing that Wuthering Waves is releasing in less than 2 weeks, but all I know is that this wait is going to be worth it. And I am beyond privileged to have you and the rest of my community alongside me for the ride.